So we've got a really special birthday today, an album celebrating its 55th birthday here on February the 13th, 2025, originally released February 13th, 1970, 55 years ago. Crazy to think that an album we've all loved and cherished is 55 years old. It means we're getting old, right? I'm talking about Black Sabbath self-titled debut. I'm Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility. Yes, indeed. The album that was born on this day 55 years ago, recorded at Regent Sound Studios in London, England for Vertigo Records. Produced by Roger Bain. Yeah. First of all, that creepy but awesome album cover. Isn't that one of the great album covers of all time? I mean, just this nondescript house with a little creek running through it. Almost looks like a moat, and this strange witch-like waif just hanging out in the front. The colors, I mean, everything about it just looks so dreary. It's like something out of a Hammer horror film, right? And then, of course, the music just kind of sits right along. It's kind of bluesy, but really, really heavy. This little band called Black Sabbath, previously Earth, right? And Geezer Butler, Tony Iommi, Ozzy Osbourne, and Bill Ward. The classic lineup of Black Sabbath. For many, the definitive lineup of Black Sabbath, right? We're going to see a little bit of closure on their career on July 15th in Birmingham, right? That's a story for another day. But interestingly enough, two different versions of this album. We did see this quite a bit around this time period, in the latter part of the 60s and the early 70s. Some of these British bands, UK bands, would have different versions of albums released in the States and in the UK. So the European edition, of course, side one of the vinyl was the title track Black Sabbath, of course, followed by The Wizard, Behind the Wall of Sleep, and then NIB. Right? And over on side B, side 2, you had Evil Woman, which was the cover of the song by the band Crow, Sleeping Village, and then, of course, the big warning, epic at the end, the big jam cover of the Ansley Dunbar Retaliation track. Right? Here in the States, though, a little bit different. We didn't get the Evil Woman song over here. So over here we got, on side A, you got, of course, Black Sabbath, The Wizard, and then the kind of like the suite of Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, basically, in NIB. Right? And over on the flip side of the album, you got Wicked World instead of Evil Woman. And then a bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and The Warning, right? That, again, the whole sweet thing there, right? Either way you look at it, I mean, you can get obviously the remaster. It's basically got, no matter where you were, now you have the entire album, right, with all the tracks from both versions. But, what's on this album, I think, is more important than, who got what, where type of thing. Because we're looking at 1970. We're looking at the kind of the birth of heavier music. Sure, we've had bands like Cream, and Zeppelin was just a little bit before this. You got Jeff Beck's first band, the Truth Band. You've got Blue Cheer, here in the States. You got Deep Purple is just starting to do their thing as well. You got The Who. You got Jimi Hendrix Experience, right? So you do have some bands that are starting to play harder, rocking, heavier music. But arguably nothing prepared us for what came on this particular album right here. This thing we now call doom, right? Or stoner rock, right? It's just the genesis is really here. There was nothing like this before. These big, humongous riffs. There is a slight bluesy nature to this album, which you don't really get on the ones going forward, of course, starting with Paranoid. But man, the title track is just classic. The beginning, you hear the thunder and the rain, and then all of a sudden, that the devil's riff comes in. I mean, it's just amazing. Those haunting Ozzy vocals, that furious middle section, the great guitar solo. I mean, the title track is a legendary song, and has been a part of Black Sabbath's set list for decades, right? And no doubt, on July 15th in Birmingham, my guess is they probably will play that. Hopefully they will play that, right? Because there's a couple songs they can't get away from. Paranoid, Black Sabbath, Iron Man and War Pigs, right? Maybe throw Children of the Grave in there. That's mandatory Sabbath right there. You know, The Wizard. I'm not much of a harmonica guy, but I don't mind it in this song. The Wizard is bluesy, it's blustery, it's heavy, it moves fast, it's got a great chorus, the riff is very cool. You know, then you got a lot of this kind of jammy stuff, right? Jammy, kind of psychedelic bluesy things, right? You know, Lost Behind the Wall of Sleep, you know, Sleeping Village, all this kind of stuff. Love Ozzy's vocal on Sleeping Village. Sleeping Village. It's just so good. NIB crushes. First, you got the bass solo from Geezer, who I always thought was a fantastic bass player. And to me, NIB is just so crushingly heavy. I mean, that's like one of the heaviest songs at that point in time from anybody. And the riff is just great. The song makes perfect sense. So good. Wicked World's great. You know, you got some really blistering Iommi lead guitar work on this album, right? But his tone is a little bit different on this record. I think, you know, Bain produced the first couple of albums, and you could arguably say the Tony sound kind of morphs a little bit from album to album. Maybe his riffs, the way they're produced, not as immense as on future albums, but they're still amazing. And a lot of lead guitar on this record, you know. And I think Tony was great back then. I think Tony would get even better as a soloist going forward. I mean, especially if you look at the stuff in the late '70s into the early '80s. I mean, the leads he's playing on, like Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, absolutely terrific. And you know, going forward, but yeah, I mean, this is just an amazing, amazing album. And then, of course, I mean, there are the guys way back when, looking a little different, right? Really, really young. I mean, these are dudes, they were barely out of their teens, right? Early 20s. And, yeah, just creating magic. And the leap from this album to Paranoid, as much as we hail this as a early metal classic and an amazing Sabbath record, I mean, by the time the second album came out, you know, all the constant touring, playing tons and tons of live dates and experimenting with some of those Paranoid songs live on stage before they actually came out with the album. It's like all of a sudden you've got a band ready to take over the world. Here's a young band who's like making people stand up and take notice. It's like, all right, we got some heavy sounds for you. We're still kind of playing a little bit of bluesy stuff like we used to, but we're evolving really quickly. And by that second album, boom, the blueprint of Black Sabbath going forward, cemented, right? But it had to start somewhere. It had to start on here. Right, for my money, I think the Evil Woman cover is actually kind of fun, but it's like it's not really mandatory Sabbath. It's good to, because, you know, living here in the States, I never had that on a record, right, until the remasters come out, and all of a sudden now you've got the UK tracks on here, right? So having Evil Woman, I think, is pretty cool. But it's, you know, it is what it is. Cool cover, right? But yeah, it's such an important record, and if you look at like the history of heavy metal, you know, what are some important albums that you have to throw into the mix, right? Obviously, this one may be at the top of the heap, right? In rock, first two Led Zeppelin albums, Disraeli Gears by Cream, any one of the first three Hendrix albums, specifically Are You Experienced, right? E Pluribus from Blue Cheer, obviously. You know, it's 1970, but you can throw the first Sir Lord Baltimore album in there, right? Shortly thereafter, you got the first Budgie album, right? That maybe you could throw, you know, a Who album in there, but all the Who, you know, maybe not all that heavy yet, although they do have some pretty rockin' songs here and there, right? But yeah, I mean, it's just, that's the blueprint. This is the genesis of what we know as heavy metal today. Call it proto metal, call it heavy blues rock, call it hard rock, you know, or heavy rock, right? That's probably a better term for it. And then, you know, you've got right around the corner, you've got Judas Priest, right, who are actually active right around this time, but they didn't start releasing albums till a few years later. And that's your early metal, right? Your proto metal, your hard rock, your heavy rock. I mean, you don't get everything after it without some of this stuff, and specifically this. I mean, this was a game changer. And like I said, it might not be Sabbath's greatest album. I think it's quite great. I generally don't rank it up in like the top 2 or 3. But it's up there, right? It's up there. It's maybe a number 5 or 6 for me. I like other albums a little bit more, but I don't deny the greatness here and the building blocks that this helped create. So yeah, just a little happy birthday today to Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath, one of the great albums of all time and one of the great debut albums of all time, especially when it comes to heavy music. And it started a career that many of us still love to this day. I mean, they've been either my number one or number two favorite band for 45, 46 years now. A good chunk of my life, going on 50 years, right? So it's, it's, you don't get everything else without this one. So yeah, happy birthday to Black Sabbath. Thanks for watching, everybody. Let us know what you think of the Black Sabbath debut down in the comments below, and we'll see you soon here with more stuff. I am Pete Pardo. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. See you soon, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.